When I tell you that this guy is a car thief, you might think he steals whole cars, but this guy specializes in stealing a specific car part, a part you wouldn't expect or even imagine, the last part that would ever cross your mind. After that, he forms a gang specialized in stealing these parts, and it turns into a huge, fully integrated organization making up to $60 million in profits. With these profits, he climbs his way to the top of the mafia and organized crime world in New York. This is the story of a man who made himself from nothing, sure in the wrong field, but he started from zero. We'll see how he used his smarts or his keen eye to make a name for himself in a tough world like the mafia, while at the same time building a massive fortune. Peace be upon you, this is Shams al-Din. Our story happened in the 90s. At that time, New York City was facing a huge problem with car thieves. There's a story I'll tell later about a Chinese intelligence officer who became the biggest car thief in America, specifically in New York. But that guy wasn't the only one in the game. The story we're seeing today took place 5 years before the Chinese guy's story. Back in the 90s, there were gangs and criminal organizations entirely focused on cars. Imagine, in New York alone, more than 150,000 cars were stolen in just 1 year. These thefts varied. Sometimes they stole the whole car, and sometimes they'd break into the car and steal specific parts. They'd try to focus on the expensive parts, but some valuable parts weren't even on the thieves' radar because they didn't know their worth. You might ask, how could car thieves not know the value of certain parts? The answer is that these parts didn't just have monetary value. They had a hidden value no one had discovered at the time. These parts' value would later be discovered by a man named Maurizio Barkan, and this guy would go on to build the biggest empire for selling stolen car parts. Maurizio was of Italian descent. His family immigrated to America, looking for a better life. And of course, we all know that Italian immigrants in America became closely associated with the biggest mafia and organized crime families, so Maurizio grew up in these circles. In the mafia world, there were layers, just like in normal society. You had the lower-level gangsters who did the dirty work, like stealing, looting, kidnapping, and even murder. Then there were those a little higher up, like small-time bosses who sometimes played the role of businessmen. And of course, at the top were the big bosses who ran everything. The organized crime world was made up of levels, and the higher you went, the richer and more powerful you became. That's why those at the bottom always aspired to rise up and reach the top. Our guy, Maurizio, came from the bottom, from a poor family with no connections or anyone to help him, so he had to build himself up from scratch. He started off doing the dirty work, stealing, looting, and selling what he stole to traders or other people. During this time, he kept his eyes open, watching what was in high demand in the market, what prices were rising, and what was easy to steal. During this period, he rubbed shoulders with the sons of bosses and traders, talking to them and learning how the business worked. Eventually, Maurizio decided to focus on car parts because he saw that it was a profitable business, and he felt that his skills were well suited for it. Once he felt he had gained the necessary experience and understood how the business worked, he decided to try and move up to the trader level. So, he started buying car parts from thieves, and he got to know which parts were in high demand and which ones made the most profit. Even in the beginning, he sold parts straight out of his own car, basically turning his car into a mobile shop. And imagine, the parts he bought for $10, he was selling for $100, so his profit margins were insane. His business quickly expanded, and as his money grew, the moment he had enough cash, he went ahead and opened a store in 1994. The store gave him a legal front, making his business easier. Before that, he was buying and selling on the streets, which always put him at risk. Anyone in the mafia or organized crime world knows that the first step to becoming a successful businessman in the underworld is to open up a store or a legal front so you can operate with more peace of mind. Maurizio opened a store and a workshop to sell car parts. To make the store look more legit, he even bought real car parts from companies, meaning genuine parts. So, if the cops or authorities ever searched the store for any reason, they'd find real parts, invoices, and dealings with companies. No one would suspect anything. After he set up a legal front and covered himself from the front, he had to start paying attention to the back end. In the mafia world, there's always someone above you, and if you want to operate smoothly in a certain area or field, like car parts, you have to pay up. Maurizio knew this very well, so he always handled things with those above him, paying the mafia regularly. These payments weren't just to avoid problems, they were protection money, meaning he was under their financial protection from the boss controlling the area. That's how things work in this world, which is why they call it organized crime. Maurizio's business kept growing and thriving, and he built stronger connections with low-level thieves. He was always on the lookout for more valuable parts, focusing on those with high profit margins that were in high demand. Then, he stumbled upon the part that would change his life, the part that would elevate him to a higher level, turning him from a small-time dealer to someone close to the bosses. This part, which I'm sure most of you didn't expect, was the airbag. The airbag that deploys in a crash. That's the part that turned Maurizio into one of the richest mafia dealers, with a fortune of over $60 million. I bet you're still surprised and can't wrap your head around how something like an airbag could bring in all that money. Let me tell you how. Maurizio noticed that airbags were one of the easiest parts for thieves to steal from a car. A thief could steal an airbag in less than a minute. And of course, airbags are small, easy to hide in a bag, so you could steal a massive number of airbags in a short time. For example, if there were 30 cars in a parking lot, you could steal all their airbags in less than half an hour, unlike stealing an entire car or a big part. This added an important aspect to the process. Tracking airbags was way harder than tracking full cars or large parts. Imagine, back then, airbags didn't have serial numbers, so after they were stolen, there was no way to trace them. And of course, hiding and storing them was easy, since they were small. Most importantly, they were expensive. A single airbag could cost between $1,000 and $2,000, sometimes even more. And money back then was worth twice what it is today. All these factors made airbags the perfect part for someone like Maurizio to build a fortune from. There's an extra advantage that we'll mention later, one even Maurizio didn't expect, which took his business to the next level. But before we get ahead of ourselves, the first thing Maurizio did was study and learn all about airbags. He learned the different types, how to remove them, and how to install them. Then, he put together his own group of thieves, personally picking the members. Of course, through his past dealings with thieves, he already knew who the best ones were, so he chose the top guys and put them to work for him. He taught them how to remove airbags quickly and professionally. The thieves got to work, collecting airbags and bringing them to the shop. From the start, Maurizio knew this airbag business was going to boom. His crew was bringing in massive quantities, and the demand was huge. Most of Maurizio's customers were mechanics and auto repair shops, so the airbags came in one door and went out the other almost instantly. And Maurizio wasn't stingy with his thieves. He paid them well because he knew that the money he gave them was nothing compared to the profits he was making. Still, his profit margins were insane. He was paying about $200 per airbag and selling them for $1,000 to $2,000 or more. Even the NYPD started noticing the trend, getting tons of reports about airbag thefts. They were confused by this new wave. They'd get the theft reports, go check out the cars, and find them in perfect condition. Except the airbag was missing. They couldn't figure out what was going on. But after a short period of investigation, they started to catch on. Airbags didn't have serial numbers, making them impossible to trace. Since they were small and quick to steal, it was hard to catch the thieves in the act. Once the cops found out that airbags were selling for $1,000 to $2,000 or more, the picture became clear. They realized an organized group was behind these operations. Even after they finally managed to catch a few airbag thieves, the thieves refused to talk. When investigators asked, "Who's behind this? Who's paying you?" the answer was always, "I work alone." He took all the blame himself because they knew that stealing airbags was considered a petty theft. The thieves would spend a few hours in jail, pay a fine and compensation, and that was the end of it. There wasn't even a serious punishment to deter them or force them to reveal who was behind the whole operation. The airbag thefts kept happening all over New York and were increasing every day. Thousands of airbags were stolen in just 1 year, and the problem was becoming widespread. The police were baffled, not knowing how to get to the source or mastermind behind it all. Meanwhile, our guy Maurizio was living the dream to the fullest. Imagine, the number of airbags his thieves were stealing became so huge that they didn't even know where to store them anymore. So he decided to open a large workshop called All-in-One. This workshop was basically a huge warehouse. One part was for storing spare parts and airbags, and the other part was a workshop. Instead of just selling the airbags to mechanics and repair shop owners, Maurizio started replacing them himself or selling them directly to customers, making even more money. And get this, he even started offering shipping services all across America. If you lived on the other side of the country and needed an airbag, you could get it delivered to you with no hassle. The bold part was that he even started advertising his business and called himself the Airbag King. He ran ads in magazines, newspapers, and even online, even though the internet had just barely emerged. Naturally, all this made his business boom even more, and the cash started piling up in the millions. He had so much cash that he didn't know where to stash it anymore. That's when he started worrying about something else: financial scrutiny. If the authorities ever decided to investigate where all his money was coming from, Maurizio figured he needed a skilled accountant to handle his financial records and make everything look legit. This is an essential part of organized crime. Maurizio had a girlfriend named Eileen. He had known her since high school. Eileen was an accountant with experience, so Maurizio asked her to be the accountant for his car parts business. When Maurizio showed her the financial records, she immediately understood that something was off and that this place wasn't running clean. Once Maurizio realized that she figured out what was going on, he came clean and told her that all she needed to do was organize the records and make the financial transactions look legal. Eileen was hesitant at first, but Maurizio tempted her with a good salary, so she eventually agreed. One of the tips she gave him was to start using checks, as it would make the company look more legitimate. So Maurizio contracted with a check payment company and started paying all his employees, including the thieves working for him, by check. That way, they would cash the checks at the payment company, making the transactions appear more legitimate. After that, Maurizio decided to distance himself from the dirty side of the business. Previously, he was directly managing the thieves, but he decided to promote 3 of them, making them his close assistants. These 3 were now in charge of managing the thieves and the theft-related side of things, while he stayed away from the dirty work. The business became more organized and ran smoothly, not just financially, but also in terms of efficiency and management. Imagine receiving an order for a specific airbag that wasn't in stock, and the thieves would steal it the same day, fulfilling the order in less than 24 hours. Better service than the official dealerships. Maurizio was running a customer satisfaction is our goal system and had complete control over the airbag market. Imagine your car's airbag gets stolen overnight, and in the morning, You go to his shop to get it replaced. This was the added twist Maurizio himself hadn't anticipated. He was creating the problem and solving it at the same time. Supply and demand became his game. He was the one stealing and the one selling. It was as if he found a never-ending money-making glitch. Maurizio's business became so successful that he won the Dealer of the Year award. Anyone looking at him from the outside, without knowing the secrets of his business, would think he was a self-made man who worked hard to become a top-tier businessman. The fortune he accumulated made Maurizio one of the wealthiest people in New York's organized crime world. He bought luxury homes and expensive cars, living the high life. But this wealth wasn't enough for him. He also wanted respect and status. In the mafia world, you only get that status if you're part of a boss's family. And since Maurizio came from a poor, ordinary family with no connections to mafia leaders, he needed to become part of a boss's family. That's how he met Carol Montana, the daughter of a mafia boss. He started getting close to her, expressing his admiration. It's likely that her status mattered more to him than anything else, even if she was beautiful and had other good qualities. To him, she was just the boss's daughter, which made her the perfect woman. Later, Maurizio got closer to her father, and her father was already impressed with him. He admired how Maurizio made his own way to the top and how he met his daughter through his own efforts. So the boss approved of their relationship, and Maurizio and Carol got engaged. At this point, Maurizio felt like he had achieved everything: wealth, a wife, and status. But in the world of gangs and crime, you should always know that even if everything seems perfect, it can all fall apart in an instant. The police managed to catch one of the thieves working for Maurizio. You might think this wasn't a big deal, since the thief would usually spend a few hours in jail and then be released with a fine, as usual. But unfortunately for Maurizio, this thief wasn't caught stealing an airbag. He was caught assaulting someone to rob them. And that's a serious crime that could send him to jail for a long time. The thief was willing to do anything to get out of this mess, and he knew the police would ask him for all the information he had about Maurizio's airbag empire. He made a deal with them, agreeing to give them the information he had in exchange for dropping the charges against him. The police agreed, and the thief spilled everything. He told them all about Maurizio and his company, all in one, and explained how the entire operation worked. Right away, the police set up a surveillance team around Maurizio's shop, and they immediately noticed people carrying large bags into the shop and leaving without them. The police quickly figured out that the bags contained the stolen airbags. They began preparing for a sting operation, but Maurizio was one step ahead. He was always cautious, having installed surveillance cameras all around his shop, and he quickly noticed the van the police were hiding in. The first thing Maurizio did was call his assistants and tell them to stop delivering stolen parts to the shop. After that, the detectives tried to follow Maurizio by car, but he was smart and realized they were tailing him. To confirm, he made the move of turning right 3 times, a perfect trick to know if a car is following you or not. When you turn right 3 times, it's like driving in a circle. So if the car is still behind you, it means they're tailing you. When he saw the cops make the same move, he knew for sure they were following him. From then on, Maurizio became even more cautious and told his assistants to store the stolen airbags elsewhere and no longer bring them to the shop. The police investigations continued for months. At one point, they tried a trick by sending an undercover cop with an airbag to try and sell it to Maurizio, but Maurizio returned it and refused to buy it. In fact, Maurizio never bought from random people. He had his own thieves, and he didn't take from anyone outside his group. The police kept trying to pull the same trick, but it didn't work. They wanted to infiltrate his small circle, but Maurizio was always careful and never let any strangers into his group. The investigations dragged on for a year and a half as they tried to catch him, but to no avail. Then in 1997, Honda, the Japanese car company, decided to start putting serial numbers on the airbags in their cars. This was unprecedented and helped the police a lot in their investigation. Now, if they managed to recover one of the stolen Honda airbags, they could track it and determine if it was stolen or not. The detectives started focusing on Honda cars, and whenever a new Honda airbag was stolen, they would take the serial number and put it in the database. After that, they contacted All-in-One, Maurizio's company, and ordered airbags for Honda cars from the same new models that had the serial numbers. When the airbags arrived, they were able to confirm that at least one of them was on the list they had. It was stolen. This was the first solid piece of evidence they had after over a year and a half of investigations, but they still needed stronger proof. They didn't want to arrest Maurizio and his gang until they were sure the evidence would completely take down the whole organization. So, they got a search warrant from the court to inspect the packages Maurizio's company was shipping all over the U.S. The warrant allowed them to open the packages, check their contents, then reseal them and send them without anyone noticing. The inspection revealed a massive number of airbags being sold by Maurizio's company, and they confirmed that some of them were stolen. Now, they had even stronger evidence, but that wasn't enough. They also decided to look into the financial records. These records led them to the check company Maurizio was using. As we mentioned before, the check company was cashing all the checks Maurizio's employees and thieves received, and the thieves were listed as employees. But what Maurizio didn't know was that the check company was photographing every transaction, taking a picture of the check and a photo of the person cashing it, with a camera right in front of the teller. That way, all of Maurizio's thieves and employees were photographed and recorded by the check company. In the end, the decision Maurizio made to use the check company to make his business look more legitimate backfired on him, as the photos and transactions confirmed he was directly dealing with these thieves. At that point, the detectives knew they had all the evidence they needed, and it was time to arrest Maurizio. Imagine, these investigations took 18 months to reach this point. A team of police and detectives headed to Maurizio's house with an arrest warrant from the court, which allowed them to raid the house and search it completely. But the bad surprise was that the house was empty. No one was there. This made them worry that Maurizio had found out about the arrest and fled, and now he might be on his way to another country. But after searching the house, they noticed a table with gifts on it. They quickly realized these were wedding gifts for Maurizio, who had recently gotten married. Next to the gifts was a guest list for the wedding. This list included the names of mafia bosses and well-known figures in the organized crime world, people the police were already aware of. It also included some of the thieves who had been stealing the airbags and working for Maurizio, the same ones the police had been tracking. As we mentioned before, the police knew about these airbag thieves and their identities through the check company. The list also had the names of Maurizio's parents, with their phone numbers next to them. So the detectives decided to try calling his mom and get her to reveal his location. One of the detectives reached out to her, telling her that Maurizio's house had been broken into by thieves and that they needed to get in touch with him. The mom told them that her son, Maurizio, was currently on his honeymoon with his wife on one of the Hawaiian islands and gave them the phone number he was using there. The detectives called him and told him that his house had been robbed. During the call, they managed to trace the number he was using and found out it was connected to one of the resorts on the island of Maui in Hawaii. After confirming his location, they contacted the FBI office in Hawaii and asked them to arrest him. FBI agents there moved quickly, identified the resort Maurizio was staying at, and found out his room number. They headed to the room, burst in, and arrested him right in the middle of his honeymoon. And just like that, the airbag empire came crashing down. It's estimated that Maurizio and his gang stole around 40,000 to 50,000 airbags over the years. And the fortune Maurizio alone made from the operation was about $60 million. As I mentioned before, the value of that money back then was twice what it is today. In the end, most of Maurizio's assets and money were seized, though it's unknown if he hid part of it somewhere secret. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for money laundering and conspiracy to commit theft. Honestly, I think the sentence is pretty light compared to other cases we've seen, but I don't know the exact details of how the sentence was decided. I'm sure the fact that the crimes weren't violent or armed played a role in reducing the sentence. I looked up Maurizio online and found his profile on LinkedIn, where he described himself as an operations executive with extensive experience in the automotive industry and top-notch skills in management and sales. After hearing his story, I guess we can all agree that those skills are pretty legit. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And if you've got some time, here are a few other great videos you can check out. That's it for now. See you in the next video. Take care.